Okay, I'm on mute. Welcome, YouTube. I'm trying to learn philosophy, you know? Oh, shut up, bitch. Yo. Okay, so I'm trying to learn philosophy. And I think we're about halfway done into this course. How many vids are... Yeah, 26, right? We're already at 14. And we're halfway done with 14. Let me set things up. Give me a minute. Okay. I'm live. No frame drops. Close this. What else? Yeah, I'm about all set up. I got my Red Bull. I have my notes. I'm ready to learn. Things. I guess trolley problem is supposed to be different, right? Like the other ways we answer philosophical questions, you know, the way we answer philosophical questions is that we actually answer them. But with trolley problems, we actually answer questions with another question, right? We give them a problem. Oh, no. Why is this playing? Sorry. I am so sorry. Okay. Why am I stalling? Let's just go.
But I do want to call your attention to the formula of humanity, because as I said, it's going to play a central role in Judy Thompson's ultimate diagnosis of what may be going on in our intuitions about trolley cases. So let me close the discussion of Kant by trying to connect it back to the mini unit of which it is a part. You'll recall that we began this section of the course on the 17th.
You can almost faintly hear the background music, right? It shouldn't be too obtrusive. Let's go.
That is last Thursday, with thinking about consequentialism.
Yeah, I
as
know
a moral
commonalities.
theory.
No anecdotes get lost. Okay. No thinking that That's a first-person anecdote. That's bad, right? Let's say old people driving. Like you say, old people are bad drivers. I'll say that significantly more young people get into traffic accidents than old people. Old people are objectively better drivers. We have stats, we have everything. And you'll be like, no, I was with my grandpa and he cannot drive. It's so bad. And I'm like, no. The concept of old people being bad drivers is not backed by data. Your statement or your assertion is not backed up by data. And he'll be like, significantly more young people drive than old people, because significantly more young people are there in the world than old people. And I'd be like, yes, but old people have also driven a lot longer than young people have. So the chances of getting into an accident is sort of even, right? And then he gives a counter example with younger people have faster cars, and it goes on and on.
So, as you know, the paper which we read for today is a great and intricate paper by the philosopher Judith Jarvis Thomson,
written
in the mid-1980s in response to an earlier paper by another mid-century woman philosopher, Philippa Foot.
Look her up.
And what Philippa Foot and Judy Thompson are interested in these papers is a systematic exploration of a number of cases which seem to evoke in most subjects pretty powerful intuitions about what the right thing to do is, but which seem to adduce intuitions, the explanation for which is hard to systematize. So, as you know well, the first case, which we'll call trolley driver, there's the driver, is this. There's a trolley hurtling down a track in such a way that it's going to kill 5 people. But it turns out that there is a second track onto which the trolley could be diverted, where there is only 1 person. And the question is this: the trolley driver is driving the trolley. It's heading towards the 5 people in such a way that he is going to kill the 5.
Okay.
Should he? Is he morally required to, morally prohibited from, or perhaps neither prohibited nor required, but rather just permitted, to turn the trolley onto the track where there is only the 1? Now notice that though this is framed as an idealized problem,
Well, he's a driver.
the
He can do anything
diversion of
he
threats
wants, right?
is something
He can
that
just turn.
decision makers face all the time. Suppose there is an airplane that has become incapacitated, that's falling in such a way that it's going to
Wait.
land on a large city, and it would be possible to divert the plane so that it falls on a less populated area
No fucking
instead. Suppose that there is an illness
Human
which is
rights,
taking the lives
the
of many
trolley.
people.
Is this the
But
paper?
if one quarantines those who are ill, causing that number.
Wait. I think I found the paper. Wait a minute. Let me look through it. No, it's something else. It's Philippa Foot. What? Philippa Foot? Who's Philippa Foot? The trolley problem. Judy Jarvis Thompson teaches us at MIT. Whatever. Okay. Philippa Foot is the creator, I guess. No. Who is she? Okay, she's the creator, and now Judith Jarvis is the poster child for this. Okay. Wow, this PDF is really good. Okay, I'm gonna link this in my notes. Yeah, links in the description. Let's continue with the lecture.
To die, the rest of the population will be spared. In case after case, we face dilemmas with roughly the structure of trolley. So, though these cases are idealized in the sense that we're granting ourselves that we know with certainty what the outcomes will be, it
Okay.
is, I think, not a useless exercise, even if our concern is real-world morality, to think through what the right thing to do is in these cases. So let's start with the case of the trolley driver. Driver of the trolley. The trolley is heading down the track in such a way that the driver will, with the trolley, kill 5 people if he doesn't turn it. He faces the
Nice.
choice of turning the trolley onto the track where there is the 1. Question, is it morally mandatory for him to turn the trolley from the 5 to the 1? Is it morally permitted but not morally mandatory for him to turn the trolley from the 5 to the 1? Or is it morally prohibited for him to turn the trolley from the 5 to the 1?
You know what? I'll choose 2. I'm a fence-sitter and I'm not ashamed of it. Okay? 2. The ones who choose 1 and 3 are sociopaths. Let's go.
Okay. So let's see how the numbers come out. I'm going to write these down because we're going to need them for later. So 7% of you, very, very small number, think that it's morally prohibited for him to turn the trolley.
Bro,
The vast
pacifist
majority
Andes.
of you,
What the
close
hell?
to 2/3, think that it's morally permitted but not morally mandatory for him to turn the trolley. And about 30% of you, roughly a third,
I mean, a driver, by the very nature of his job, right? They're supposed to drive things, and when gets into like a situation where he has to minimize the harm cost, because that's the description, right? So it is morally permitted, but it's not morally mandatory. tracks. These fuckers, what are they doing on the track? What the fuck? Get off. Yo, work somewhere else. Why are people hanging out on train tracks?
Think that he is morally required to make that turn. Case number 2, transplant. You're running a hospital. 5 people show up at the hospital. All of them destined to die because one needs a lung and one needs a heart and one needs a kidney and one needs a liver and one needs a brain. So they're all going to die, and you are the doctor, and into the emergency room walks a perfectly healthy young man who has a heart and a lung and a liver and a kidney and a really good active brain. And if you were to chop up that man and give his parts to the 5 suffering individuals, you could save the 5 at the cost of the 1. Question for the doctor, is it A, morally mandatory to chop up the healthy man to save the 5? B, morally permitted but...
Okay, I need to rename this. Wait a minute. Hold on. Rename this. Trolley problem long. Get Phil 119 human rights trolley problem .pdf, right? Get to these. Whatever cares. Trolley problem. I just need this. Oh my god, I needed the T. Yo. Okay. Now we update this. And we're set. Sorry for the scuffed stream. Let's go.
Not morally mandatory to chop up the healthy man, or C, morally prohibited to chop up the healthy man. So let's see how the numbers come out.
Okay. Is it morally mandatory for the doctor, right? Since he's a doctor, he cannot kill people, right? But doctors use their time in such a way as to, choose between 2 different clients. Let's say that I perform the surgery. Let's say in a private hospital, you can choose your clients, right? You can refuse to operate on someone. Or am I just talking out of my ass? I don't even know. Okay, whatever. Doctors do not have the agency to kill people directly. Proceed. Is it morally permitted but not morally mandatory to chop up the healthy man? Is it morally prohibited to chop the healthy man? It is morally prohibited. No. It is morally mandatory? No, it's not morally mandatory. Okay, I'm not going to be the fence sitter. I really don't have an inclination to be a fence sitter this time, because the description of a doctor is to save lives, not take them. But at the same time, they indirectly take lives. But in the first problem, they had to kill. He didn't. He had to choose between saving 1 person and 5 people, right? Here, the doctor has to choose between killing 1 guy and letting 5 people die. I think she'll explain it, because I heard it before. Because these are 2 different scenarios. They may sound the same, but they're 2 different, because here you're actually killing, right? If the fat man example was there, that he was standing on top of a bridge and you push it and the train stops and 5 people are saved, this would be the same example, but right now it's not. Okay.
All right. So, 6, 9, 85.
Oh, thank God.
85% of you think it is morally prohibited.
Who the fuck? 1%.
To cut up the 1 to save the 5. 9% of you think it is morally permitted but not morally mandatory. And 6% of you, off to med school, think that it is morally mandatory to chop up the healthy man. So what's going on here?
Okay.
So Philippa Foot, who was the person who initially presented this juxtaposition,
never have a utilitarian doctor who thinks he can kill you and get away with it. I guess that's the thing. Okay.
Hypothesis, and her hypothesis is this: that in the trolley driver case, the choice that the driver faces
exactly.
is between killing 1 and killing 5.
This is Philippa Foot, right? She said Philippa Foot.
So Philippa Foot, who was the person who initially presented this juxtaposition, has a hypothesis, and her hypothesis is this: that in the trolley driver case,
check this out. Right? Yeah. And we go in. Yeah, there she is, Philippa Foot, the OG. And she's the poster child right now, Judith Jarvis Thompson.
Choice that the driver faces is between killing 1 and killing 5, whereas in the transplant case, the choice that the doctor faces is between killing 1 and letting 5 die. And if we were to graph these on what I'll call the bad-o-meter, which tells us how bad things are, we would discover that letting 5 die is bad, but killing 1 is worse, and killing 5 is even worse. And so this seems to give us the answer that since killing 5 is worse than killing 1, then in the trolley driver case, it's okay for him to turn the trolley. But since killing 1 is worse than letting 5 die, that in the doctor case, it's not okay to chop up the 1 man. Because in the doctor case, you have to kill 1 to save 5. Whereas in the trolley case, the driver has to kill 1 in order not to kill 5.
Yeah.
And that seems to accord pretty well with your intuitions. 93% of you think it's permitted in the trolley case to turn the trolley, whereas only 14% of you think it's permitted in the doctor case to kill the 1. So it looks like this bad-o-meter is pretty well capturing the intuitions of those of you in this classroom, and in fact empirical studies that have been done on thousands and thousands.
I know these people are kids, but 14% you.
Of people throughout the world suggest that your intuitions are pretty much in line with the intuitions of most. But there's a problem. Case number 3, trolley bystander. Here's Jim. Poor Jim's really bad luck. First he shows up in this Latin American town. He's supposed to shoot some Indians. Now here he is next to a trolley, which is hurtling down a track about to kill 5 people. But here there is in the middle of the track a switch that if Jim turns will cause the trolley to kill the 1. Question for Jim, the bystander: is it morally mandatory for him to turn the trolley so that instead of the trolley hitting the 5, it hits the 1? Is it morally permitted but not morally mandatory for him to turn the trolley? That's answer 2. Or is it morally prohibited? Down a track about to kill 5 people, but here there is in the middle of the track. Poor Jim's number 3, trolley bystander. Here's Jim. Poor Jim's really bad luck. First he shows up in this Latin American town. He's supposed to shoot some Indians. Now here he is next to a trolley, which is hurtling down a track about to kill 5 people. But here there is in the middle of the track a switch that if Jim turns will cause the trolley to kill the 1. Question: mandatory for him to turn the trolley so that instead of the trolley hitting the 5, it hits the 1?
It's not the fat man example.
Permitted but not morally mandatory for him to turn the trolley? That's answer 2. Or is it morally prohibited for him to turn?
The thing is, he's a bystander. You do not expect, you cannot have, you have realistic expectation of strangers, right? Like, yeah, of course, you don't treat strangers with maximum hostility, like, and everything, but you don't treat your doctor with any hostility at all, right? So they're playing different roles. So 2, easy.
The trolley. Let's see how those numbers come out. Okay, and here are your numbers: 15, 70, 15. These are very, very similar to the distribution of answers that you gave in the driver case.
Feels to be popular.
In the driver case, 63% of you thought it was morally permitted, whereas here 70% of you think it's morally permitted. In the driver case, 30% of you thought it was morally mandatory. Here, slightly fewer of you think it's morally mandatory, 15%. And in the driver case, 7% of you thought it was prohibited. Here, 15% of you think it's morally prohibited. So there's a little change, but not a lot of change. Here's the problem. Remember that in Foote's analysis of the case, we knew that letting 5 die was a little bit bad, that killing 1 was worse, and that killing 5 was worse than that. Trolley driver faced the choice of killing 1 versus killing 5. In transplant, you faced
have
the
to
choice
kill
of killing
none.
1 versus letting 5.
She's saying that you're a bystander, so you do not have the responsibility to do anything. You can just kill none or kill 1, you know? Okay.
Die?
Nice
What's
coach.
going on in the bystander case? Well, in the bystander case, Jim,
Kill 1, let 5 die,
Jim of the bad luck, faces a choice between killing 1, diverting the trolley onto the track in such a way that Jim kills that guy, or
a doctor
letting
is special.
5 die.
That's it.
Letting the trolley hit the 5 that it's going to hit inevitably. But in contrast to the doctor case, where 85% of you thought it was prohibited to kill the 1 in order to save the 5 who would otherwise die, in this case, 85% of you think it's at least permitted to kill the 1 in order to let the 5 die. Let me do that again for you. 85% of you watch the badometer.
You cannot hold a bystander like a stranger and a doctor in an actual hospital to the same standards, right? Or even a doctor at your home or whatever. It's a doctor. It's a title. Bystander is just something, you know? Someone who cares. Bystander.
The other way. Now, what's going on? We thought we had a solution to the problem. The solution to the problem that differentiated transplant from trolley driver was the distinction between killing and letting die.
The agent who's doing the action is different.
There's a whole bunch of you who seem to be saying about bystander that letting 5 die is worse than killing 1. You must think that, or you wouldn't think that it's morally at least permitted for him to turn the trolley.
Okay.
Moreover, stuff gets even worse. Suppose that the hospital case comes about as follows. 5 healthy individuals show up at the hospital.
Okay.
And a doctor, either because he's tired or because he wants to get the insurance benefits, of which he is a beneficiary if there are a lot of sick patients in his hospital, poisons the 5 who show up in such a way that one of them needs a liver, one of them needs a kidney, one of them needs lungs, one of them needs a heart, and one of them needs a brain. And so, as a result of what that man has done, these 5 individuals will die.
Okay.
And it's a few hours later, and he thinks, oh, I forgot about the categorical imperative. Shoot.
Oh my God.
What am I going to do? And up shows a healthy individual, and he thinks, oh God, I've got a solution. Here, I can chop him up, heart, lung, kidneys, liver, brain, and I can save the 5. Okay. Question for the doctor who has poisoned the 5 individuals who earlier showed up at the hospital, who now faces the option of saving their lives by killing the 1. Is it a morally mandatory?
Wait.
It's a few hours later. The benefits, of which he is a benefit that one. And it's a few hours later, and he thinks, oh, I can chop him up, heart,
it's
lung,
the same
kidneys,
guy. It's not a different doctor. It's
liver,
the same guy.
brain, and I can save the 5. Okay. Question for the doctor who has poisoned the 5 individuals who earlier showed up at the hospital, who now faces the option of saving their lives by killing the 1. Is it a morally mandatory to chop up the healthy man? B, morally permitted but not morally mandatory to chop up the healthy man? Or C, morally prohibited to chop up the healthy man?
Since you poison those 5 people, but that doesn't change the case that they all needed an organ to live.
Suppose that the hospital case comes about as follows. 5 healthy individuals show up at the hospital, and a doctor, benefits, of which he is a benefit, who show up in such a way that one of them needs a liver, one of them needs a kidney, one of them reasons the 5 who show up.
So they're actually healthy. They're not missing any organs. So the doctor basically is trying to kill, right? No. It is morally mandatory to chop up the healthy man. it is morally mandatory to chop up the healthy man. Okay, this is interesting because if the doctor is the one poisoning and damaging the organs in such a way that he fucked up, right? He should cut himself off up and give his organs for the last part and teach the guy how to do that. I don't know. I don't know. I actually don't know. This is so interesting. Okay. Um, is it morally mandatory to chop up the healthy man? Actually, you know what? It is morally prohibited to chop up the healthy man. I do not trust this doctor. He's retarded.
Question for the doctor who has poisoned the 5 individuals who earlier
He's
showed up at the
retarded.
hospital, who now
He should
faces
lose
the
his
option
license.
of saving
Till
their lives
5
by
people
killing
go
the
to
one.
jail, bro.
Is it A,
No
morally
saving
mandatory
you,
to chop
bro.
up the healthy man? B,
You get-
morally permitted but
Don't
not morally
ruin
mandatory?
another fucking life, yo. You should not get agency. I mean, my moral endorsement to ruin another life because you have ruined already 5 people's lives by poisoning them. Okay? Am I just a virtue signaler? Who knows? Whatever.
Mandatory to chop up the healthy man, or C, morally prohibited to chop up the healthy man, and let's see how the numbers come out.
Let's see. 3.
All right. So, 82,
Thank you.
11, 7. So your numbers here are almost identical to what they were in the original doctor case. There it was 6, 9, 85. Here it's 7, 11, 82. Almost no difference. But let's go back to our badometer. We are going to set aside the killing and letting die question and just look at the kill 1 versus kill 5. So we know from Trolley driver that killing 1 is pretty bad, but according to most of you, according to 93% of you, killing 5 is worse than killing 1.
Yes.
Okay. Poison doctor. So here's what
Killing 5,
choice
yeah.
the doctor faces.
Yeah.
He can kill 5.
Max out the
Right?
barometer.
He's poisoned them, and now
Max
they're
out
going
the
to die.
barometer, yeah.
Or he can kill just 1, that one healthy guy who just showed up, and then the other 5 won't die.
See, he
82
already chose to kill the 5 people, right? He poisoned them. So he shouldn't have agency over 6. Just to save the previous 5, his mistakes. He fucked up. He's going to... I should be more solution oriented. But this guy clearly has a compromised agency. Especially because he's a doctor. He's not just some fucking bystander, someone just chilling, So, yeah. We hold doctors to higher standards.
percent of you told me that it was better for him to kill 5 than to kill 1. Let me show you this again on the barometer.
Yes.
85% of you thought that it was better for him to kill 5 than to kill 1. So we had these 2 super duper excellent principles that seemed to explain what was going on in the Trolley case. On the one hand, that killing 1 was worse than letting 5 die, and then all of a sudden bystander made us think, oh no, we don't have that intuition. And then we had the intuition that at least killing 1 was better than killing 5. And the poison case made us rethink that as well. Now, there's an obvious issue that may be making the moral difference here. There's a temporal difference between when the killing of the 1 and the killing of the 5 happens. And perhaps, says Thompson, perhaps that's what explains our intuition in the doctor case. Perhaps it is because the killing of the 5 has become a letting die as the result of time, that it's misleading to describe this as a kill 1 versus kill 5 case.
Yes.
But the temporal is not going to help us with the transplant versus bystander case.
True.
Those seem pretty clearly to be both cases where one faces a choice between killing 1 and letting 5 die. And whereas it seemed pretty clear to most of you in
such joyful music over this. Okay, let me get something, calmer. This. Please do not. Please be chill. Okay, let's chill.
Transplant that killing one was worse than letting 5 die. It seems pretty clear that for most of you in bystander, it's the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
So the trolley problem is the problem raised by these dancing arrows.
Okay.
How is it that we systematize our intuitions about killing and letting die, given that they appear to come apart in these cases?
We
So
don't.
Thompson suggests that whereas the transplant case gives us a choice between killing one and letting 5 die, as does bystander, there is a potentially relevant difference between them. And
Yeah.
that is that in the case of transplant, you are using the one as a means. You're using the one as a way to achieve the outcome of saving the other 5. Whereas in bystander, when you're diverting the trolley onto the track where that one individual is, you're not using that individual as a means. And oh my goodness, I told you we'd get back to Kant, and we have. What did Kant's formula of humanity say? Kant's formula of humanity said,
Bro.
so act as to treat humanity, whether in your own person or that of any other, in every case as an end and never merely
Bro,
as a
Kant
means
is already
only.
dead. Let him die.
So
Why-
maybe that's our
why bring
solution.
him?
Maybe the problem in bystander is that since you're not treating him as a means, it's okay to kill the one. Whereas in transplant, since you are treating him as a means, it's
is
not
not
okay to
okay.
kill the one.
Yeah.
And consequently, you're morally
Yeah,
obliged to let the 5 die.
Let the 5 die.
Well, says Thompson, that can't be quite right. Suppose that you're Jim, you're standing next to the trolley, trolley's on its usual path to kill the 5, but here, instead of the straight track on which the one sits, there's a looped track, and the one is in the middle of the track,
Okay.
in such a way that if you divert the trolley, it will hit him, thereby saving the 5. Question,
Nice.
in the case that Thompson calls loop, is it A, morally mandatory to turn the trolley? That's one. B, morally permitted but not morally mandatory, or C, morally prohibited. So remember,
See, all of these 5 people are not patients. They're strangers. So kill them.
trolley's heading down the track towards the 5. You're Jim. The trolley's going to hit the 5. Or you can divert the trolley onto the track with the 1. And because the 1 is there, you will cause the trolley to stop. Okay, so let's see how the numbers come out on this.
Okay, wait. Okay. Is it morally mandatory to turn the trolley? Is it morally permitted to? Is it morally permitted but not morally mandatory to turn the trolley? Is it morally prohibited to turn the trolley? True. You're a bystander. Who cares?
Okay, so 68, 18, 14, not a lot of difference. You've answered bystander in loop in
And?
almost the same way that you answered all our other trolley cases. Generally,
And?
the distribution has been 15, 70, 15. That was bystander. Here it's 14, 68, 18.
And
But notice that in this case, you are using the guy on the loop track as a means.
And?
You're using him as a means to your end. You're trying to stop the trolley by using his body. Kant didn't help us enough. Restock. Let's take stock again, says Thompson. Perhaps some of the work is being done by some notion of rights.
nice.
Perhaps what's going on in the transplant case, the one where you guys are not going to let the doctor chop up the healthy man, is that you would be violating that man's rights, and perhaps it's true that rights trump utilities. That is,
Okay.
that when somebody has a right to bodily integrity, that takes precedence over the needs of the many, the utilities
Okay.
of the 5 that are going to be saved. And we'll close this lecture with the final example,
We're
one that's
closing
meant
it?
to test that
Yes, the
hypothesis.
fat man. The
And we'll
fat
begin
man.
next lecture by talking about some of the reasons that people tend to give this response. So suppose now that instead of the looping track, there's a bridge. And suppose that on that bridge is our fairly large gentleman.
Yes.
And you are now faced with the following dilemma. The trolley's heading down the track, it's about to kill the 5, and here's how Jim the bystander
Why
can
is
stop
he
it.
standing on a
He can
bridge?
put-
Does he trust me? Not civil society, anarchy. Let's go.
The fat man off the bridge and thereby cause the trolley to
This
be
is so
stopped in its
fucked up.
tracks by his weight. Question for the bystander in Fat Man: is it morally mandatory to push the fat man, morally permitted but not morally mandatory, or morally prohibited to push the fat man?
Two.
Let's take responses, and I'll leave you with those numbers and a remark about them as our close. So let's see whether we get any shift in the fat man case. My goodness, that looks awfully
Look
different.
at the pussies.
What
Look
is
at
going
the pussies. They cannot kill fat people. See, people just cannot kill fat people. That's the problem. You know, if you do not view them as human. What am I doing? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No. But yeah, two. Number three are just pussies. It's not that they don't want to kill fat people because they're like, whatever. It's more like, you put yourself as an agent, right? Here, you could be the bystander. You cannot be the doctor ever, right? But you could be the bystander. So pushing someone hits people different, I guess. People can envision themselves in that situation. So, yeah. Of course they chose three. I suppose it's a good thing that we live in a society where people would choose three, right? Otherwise, it'll be like, imagine if people were let's say normal people just chose two, like always. What kind of a world would it be? Certainly not one in which I would like to live, right? Utilitarian calculus is not good. It's a good thing that people have such a strong inclination to not kill.
So remember, our classic distribution is that we have roughly 70% here and no more than 10% in the prohibited. All of a sudden, 78% of you think it's prohibited. What's going on? Cliffhanger. We'll talk about it on Tuesday.
Okay, it's Tuesday.
All right, so we left ourselves at the end of the last lecture in
all
a
the
somewhat
lectures-
perplexing situation. We
Why do-
had thought
Who's recording this? Who's recording this? Why is he doing a terrible job? The last lecture was exceptionally loud. This one is the previous one before that was exceptionally quiet. Now it's just in the middle. Like, what?
through the
What's
particular
going on?
scenarios that Judy Thompson presents us with in her trolley.
Can the
paper.
sound guy,
And we had discovered the following
you know,
apparently perplexing
pull his shit
feature
together and
about the class's response.
do his job?
In what's called the
Please.
classic bystander case, the case where there's a bystander standing next to a trolley that's hurtling down a track about to hit 5 people, and the bystander could, if he chose, turn the trolley onto a track where the trolley
No,
will only
let
hit
them
one
all die.
person. Your responses
Actually,
were
you know
as
what?
follows.
Reverse the
Roughly-
train. Kill 5 people, then reverse the train. Kill the one too. Why should he live? Fuck it.
15% of you
Kill them
thought he
all.
was morally required.
And then
to turn
jump
the
in
trolley.
front of the train yourself and drive it. Kill you, and it kills you too. GG. All over. No more morality. Right?
From the 5 to the 1. 70% of you thought he was
No
morally
responsibility
permitted to
at
do
all.
so, and only 15% of you
Nobody-
thought that it's a morally prohibited act for him to turn the trolley from the 5 to the 1. By contrast, we ended class with Thompson's famous fat man case. This is a case where our bystander is standing next to the trolley as before. The trolley is hurtling down the track, about to kill the 5. And the bystander has available to him a means for stopping the trolley. In this case, rather than turning it onto a different track, the means he has available to him is to push a fat man off a bridge, thereby stopping the trolley in its tracks. And the responses in this case exhibited a highly different distribution than they did in the first case. Whereas in the first case, 15% of you thought it was prohibited to stop the trolley from hitting the 5 by killing the 1 or by causing the trolley to kill the 1. In the Fat Man case, 78% of you, 4/5 of the class, thought that the act of turning or of stopping the trolley by putting in its way another person
I just
was
want to know what the 6% of people, bro. How come there's 6% of people in this class who are like, yeah, it's morally required? Yeah. Okay, there are too many sociopaths in this class. I'm comfortable with the 78%. That's what normal people would pick. Nobody has an inclination to kill. And 16% is also fine because they're like calculating and shit. Who are these 6%? Who?
morally prohibited.
Who's trolling?
Now, the puzzle that this raises, as you know from the end of last class, is that it seems that in both the bystander case, where the puzzle is this. In the bystander case, it seems clear to most people that killing one person is bad, but that letting 5 die is worse.
Worse, yes.
Whereas in the Fat Man case, it seems to be just the inverse.
And?
So what Thompson asks us at the end of that paper, having run through a number of cases, including some that I didn't go over in this summary right now, is what could possibly explain the difference in our reactions to the bystander case and the Fat Man case. And what she suggests is that whereas utility prohibits letting the 5 die, that is, it would be better for the number of lives saved if we saved 5 than if we saved 1. The notion of a right is what prohibits killing the 1 in the Fat Man case. So
No. People just cannot kill. That's the thing. Not all people are killers. Majority of people are not killers. People are good people. That's the thing. What is this right bullshit, huh? Dude, philosophers are so cringe.
has to happen. The notion of a right is what prohibits killing the 1 in the Fat Man case. So what has to happen, says Thompson, in the Fat Man case is that you interfere with his right not to have his person used as a means to the end of saving another.
Bro,
whereas in the case of bystander,
with
there's no right that is
guy.
infringed upon. And, suggests Thompson, rights trump utilities. So what the right prohibits is what is mandated in the Fat Man case. So that's where we were at the end of class last time. And the solution that Thompson proposed there is what we might call a classic solution to trolley-type dilemmas. It's a solution that assumes that Fat Man case and the bystander case carry different moral mandates, and that the reason they carry those different mandates is because of a deep moral difference that those cases encode. So the difference between our response to Fat Man and our response to bystander, says Thompson in that 1985 article, is one that we should respect. And the reason we should respect that difference, she contends, is that that difference is tracking a profound moral difference between them. Namely that in the case of Fat Man, but not in the case of bystander, the rights of an individual are violated. What I want to do in class today is to go through with you 3 non-classic responses to the trolley case. And I'll be giving you the chance to use your clickers in the first and third of these. So if you get your clickers out, we'll be prepared for what's going to happen in a few minutes. So what are the 3 classic responses? Remember, in a classic response, the claim is that Fat Man and bystander carry different moral mandates, and that difference can be traced to a deeper morally relevant difference between them. So 2 of the responses that we'll consider today are ones that suggest that Fat Man and bystander, in fact, don't carry different moral mandates. So the first example that I'm going to run through with you is Judy Thompson's rethinking of trolley cases in a 2008 paper, in which she ends up assimilating the bystander case to the Fat Man case, and suggesting that in neither of the cases is it permissible to kill the 1 to save the 5. The second view that we'll consider is Josh Green's view that the right thing to do in the Fat Man case is the same thing as the right thing to do in the bystander case, namely that in both cases, the right thing to do is to stop the trolley from hitting the 5 and cause it instead to kill the 1. And finally, I'm shoehorning this a bit because in truth, Sunstein is a little closer to Green than he is to Thompson, but we might use his thinking to maintain the position that though our responses to the cases differ, the cases are in some more fundamental sense the same. And what Sunstein's going to suggest we need to do is to push the fat man. So what we have are three views here. Thompson saying the cases come together, and they come together in telling us never to kill the 1 to save the 5. Green saying the cases come together, and they come together in telling us always kill the 1 to save the 5. And then perhaps Sunstein's view telling us that the cases come apart. But these three non-classic responses are interesting not just for the difference in their content. I think they're interesting for the purposes of this class, because each of them makes use of a slightly different kind of argumentative methodology. And there's no reason that the methodologies and the answers needed to line up in the way that they did. So one of the things that I want you to think about as we go through today's lecture is what use might be made of each of these methodologies to make one of the alternative arguments.
Dude,
so Thompson's contention that in the bystander case we shouldn't turn the trolley is one that she makes on the basis of inviting you, as I will do in a moment, to consider additional hypothetical cases, and then asking you to be consistent about your responses.
Let me lower the volume of this music a bit.
That fail to differ in moral
people.
ways. So Thompson's methodology is the same as it was in her 1985 paper. There's just a new case that she's thought about. Sunstein's methodology is to canvass a large array of literature in the heuristics and biases tradition, and to suggest that moral reasoning is no different than any other sort of reasoning. And Josh Green's method is, of course, to make use of neuroimaging results, and on that basis, to argue in favor of his
Let's see them.
view
Let's see
that
them all.
what is morally mandated
We'll judge for
of us is a
ourselves
certain kind
which
of
one we
utilitarian
want.
stance.
Which one we
So
are
let's
most,
start, and here you'll need your clickers, with the additional hypothetical cases that convince Judy Thompson and may convince you that it's not okay to turn the trolley in bystander.
Okay.
So the case that Thompson presents us with is a case that we'll call bystanders 3 options. So here's poor Jim, deeply regretting that he ever enrolled in this class, standing by the trolley in a usual bystander dilemma where the trolley's about to hit the 5 and Jim has the possibility of deflecting it to hit the 1. But because Jim lives his
You have a simple name, they'll choose your name to be in one of these examples, and you'll be fucked. You'll be fucked. Or a popular name, yeah. No Jims, no Johns, no Janes, no whatever. J names especially, don't.
Life in Judy Thompson's thought experiment, she has, in rather dastardly fashion, introduced a third track, at the end of which, rather unfortunately for Jim, Jim is standing.
Oh, Bob.
Now here is Jim's 3-way dilemma. 1, allow the trolley to continue on its original path. Allow the trolley to continue on its original path, killing the 5. Option 2, deflect the trolley so that it hits the other guy. Option 3, deflect the trolley from the 5 to the 1. Oh, except the 1 is Jim.
Jim. Okay.
Question, in 3-way bystander, is it if Jim decides to turn the trolley, so we're ignoring the case where he lets it hit the 5. He's turning the trolley, he's made the decision to turn the trolley. The question is the following. Is it morally required for him to turn the trolley onto the track where it hits the other guy instead of himself? Is it morally permitted but not morally required for him to turn the trolley onto the track where it hits the other guy instead of himself?
2.
Or is it morally prohibited for him to turn the trolley onto the track instead of to himself?
2. Always 2.
Assuming that Jim has made the decision to turn the trolley from the 5. After all, it's a straight
Yo, is the
bystander.
music too loud? Okay, it's loud as fuck. Yo. Okay, it's okay now. Let's play this.
Case, If he doesn't turn the trolley, it's going to hit the 5. 78% of you have previously told me that what one ought to do, or at least what one is permitted to do in this case, is to turn the trolley. How come there's no responses coming, guys? It's not working? Oh my goodness. All right, so why is it not open for you? Let's try.
Okay.
Is it open now? Tragic. This is really, really very, very horrible. That did not work. Okay,
It's not
the whole
working?
lecture today depends upon these
This working,
So
yeah.
let's try this again.
Please.
And tell
Your
me
work.
now whether this works.
Everyone hit one.
Working?
Now. Everyone hit one. Now.
Okay. Is it working now?
It's a troll. It's a troll. You can claim it's a troll.
No?
Do it.
Still no? No? All right. We're going to have to run this. All right. I think there's nothing
Oh,
I
no.
can do. I'm going to try resetting once more and see if that works. And I'm going to try removing and then returning this receiver. And then, if not, we're going to do the old-fashioned show of hands, and all my beautifully constructed slides will turn out not to be useful. But that's all right. Worse things have happened in the world. All right, try it again. Yay! Awesome. I have no idea what I changed. Okay, so answering this question, wow, there's 64 of you, there's 71 of you. We'll do the countdown, 10, 9, 8. So let's see how the numbers come out in
Now you cannot
4,
use the
3,
excuse.
2, 1
to-
seconds. Oh, and it's so exciting, especially because we had to suffer first, the contrast. Okay, so in this case, 6% of you think it's morally required for
Morally
Jim to turn
prohibited?
the trolley onto
Yo.
the other man. You are the 6% who continue to be outliers, or perhaps you're different people, but let's look at what's going on. 61% of you think it's morally permitted for him to turn the trolley onto the other man, but only 32% of you think it's morally prohibited for him to turn the trolley onto the other man. Now, interestingly, Judy Thompson expects that more of you will fall into this category. So it's an interesting question for us to think about as a class, why it is that she is under the impression that it's rather surprising that this is the response that you gave. But in any case, let's move to a second contrast case and see how this goes. Okay, suppose now that we have only a two-way case. In the two-way case, bystander, Jim, has only two options. Either the trolley's going to hit the 5,
Okay.
or he can deflect the trolley in such a way that it hits him.
Oh my
I want to go back for a second and just get the numbers that I got on the last slide.
Self-sacrificing
I forgot to record those for
Andy.
myself, thrown off as I was by our situation. So let me just record these. 6, 61, 32. Okay, so moving on to
Dude.
the new case, it's a two-way trolley,
Dude, this is such a scuffed lecture.
and the question
This is almost as scuffed as my streams, yo. What?
in bystander's two options, is it morally required for him to let the trolley hit the 5 instead of himself? Is it morally permitted for him to let the trolley hit the 5 instead of himself? Or is it morally prohibited for him to let the trolley hit the 5 instead of himself?
No.
Okay, so let's think through that case. So remember, it's a two-way case. The trolley's heading down towards the 5. And the question is it required, permitted, or prohibited for him to turn the trolley from the 5 to hit himself?
2.
Okay, and let's see how the numbers come out here. We've got roughly 10 seconds to find out.
Let me predict. What will these people say? Is it morally required for him to let the trolley hit the 5 instead of himself? Is it morally permitted for him to let the trolley hit the 5 instead of himself? Is it morally prohibited? So, what will these people choose? Because I have not changed my stance. I wonder. Many will choose 3, won't they? I wonder if it will be the majority.
Whether your distribution is going to be similar or different here. Okay, so here's how the numbers come out.
Wow.
8, 70,
Significantly
22.
more chose 3.
Now, the
than I
case
thought.
with which we want to contrast this is the bystander, classic bystander case. In the classic bystander case, more of you thought he was morally required to turn the trolley than you think in this particular case.
Yes.
In the classic bystander case, interestingly, you had roughly the same view about whether it was morally permitted, and more of you think it's morally prohibited for him to let the trolley hit the 5 instead of
Interesting.
himself. So the interesting difference is this one here. You took a different attitude with respect to whether it's morally required for him to turn the trolley when the person it's going to hit is himself, than when the person it's going to hit is another person.
No,
So let's go back and do
I always
just a
chose
classic
to.
bystander case and see whether, as a result of having thought through this case, there's any change in your intuitions. So this
No.
is just the standard bystander case that you've seen before.
Let's skip. Do it.
So as a result of having thought about the first person analog,
Dude,
though
they
many
changed
fewer
their
than I would have
minds?
thought, some of you changed your view. Whereas
Okay.
originally 15% of you thought it was morally mandatory to turn the trolley. Oh, you've changed your view exactly the direction against the one I would have predicted. So here's a mystery. Here's a little bit of experimental philosophy done in our classroom. What Judy Thompson was predicting, we can talk in sections about why this didn't happen. What Judy Thompson was predicting is that you would react as follows. If it's not morally mandatory for me to turn the trolley onto myself, then it's not morally mandatory, indeed not morally permitted, for me to turn the trolley onto another person.
Okay.
If I'm not willing to take a hit myself in that case, I shouldn't be deciding on behalf of another person that he take that hit. So I want you to think about what it is in Thompson's thinking about this case that made it feel to her so obvious that as the result of considering the first person case, people would be inclined to rethink the third person case. And I have to say, I myself, in reading Thompson's 2008 paper, am very easily brought into the mindset she describes there. So I find it surprising and extremely interesting to see that into the mind. Standard case that you've seen before in the submitted. Some change experimental philosophies about why this didn't happen. What Judy Thompson was predicting is that you would react as follows. If it's not morally mandatory for me to turn the trolley onto myself, then it's not morally mandatory, indeed not morally permitted, for me to turn the trolley onto another person. If I'm not willing to take a hit myself in that case, I shouldn't be deciding on behalf of another person that he take that hit. So I want you to think about what it is in Thompson's thinking about this case that made it feel to her so obvious that as the result of considering the first person case, people may be not willing to take a hit mandatory, indeed not morally permitted, for me to turn the trolley onto another person. If I'm not willing to take a hit myself in that case, I shouldn't be deciding on behalf of another person that he take that hit.
Okay, so I think Judy Thompson is like completely isolating this action. We are not thinking about the agent at all, right? So in that abstract sense, yeah. It's kind of interesting that how we choose to think about this, because I hold doctors in a high regard. I guess I almost place them with different moral rules and shit, like higher than humanity and other people, right? But Judy sees herself and everyone else as the same actors. Interesting. I wonder if the role of the agent in all of this societal bullshit comes into package with this trolley problem. She would have changed her mind again, but or maybe she did consider all of this. Whatever.
So I want you to think about what it is in Thompson's thinking about this case that made it feel to her so obvious that as the result of considering the first person case, people would be inclined to rethink the third person case. And I have to say, I myself, in reading Thompson's 2008 paper, am very easily brought into the mindset she describes there. So I find it surprising and extremely interesting to see that that isn't what happened in this context. Let's assume, however, that at least for some of you, the intuition that you came to have as the result of considering this case was something like Thompson's intuition.
This generation is
whereas
just
on the
different.
old view, in bystander case, you thought the right thing was to kill the one rather than to let the five die. That is in the standard switch case, and this is in fact what most of you think. In the standard bystander case, most of you think that the right thing to do is to kill the one rather than to let the five die. What Thompson says is that in thinking through the first person case, you ought to realize that bystander is a lot more like Fat Man than you initially thought.
Yeah.
To the extent that you reject that intuition of Thompson's, you're in a position to disagree with her.
Yeah.
So let's move to the view with which I take it most of you are going to end up agreeing, since this is exactly the opposite of Thompson's, namely Green's argument that the assimilation ought to go the other way. So just to remind you where we are in the picture, the puzzle with which we began is that people were giving a different response in bystander than in Fat Man, and Thompson tried to get rid of the problem by causing you to assimilate bystander to Fat Man. I was unable, through Thompson's cases, to get you to shift your intuitions in that case. So we're stuck with a residual difference between your responses. Most of you think it's okay to turn the trolley in bystander, regardless of whether you wouldn't do it on yourself, but that it's not okay to push the man on the bridge in Fat Man. So Green is going to give us a second way of thinking about how it is that we might bring those responses together. And his argument
I wonder how much these students, are driven by reason and how much it's psychology. Because this, philosophy and the science of human nature, right? The science of human nature. See, we always discount, we always think that it's just philosophy, but yeah, this course is something different. The clickers are interesting. Maybe, do other philosophy classes have clickers like this? I don't even know. Doesn't it kind of hamper philosophy if you have clickers like this? Philosophy is supposed to be studied in isolation and everything. But if you add the science of human nature, psychology. I'm thinking too much.
In general, we're not in a very good position to determine what really underlies our reasoning. Okay. There's an entire tradition in social psychology that I talked about in one of the early lectures that aims to show that a lot of what people engage in when they make decisions is post facto rationalization of intuitive responses that they had, which weren't in fact tracking what they would say are the relevant features of the situation. So famously, people are more likely to choose an object that lies on the left-hand side of a visual array than an object that lies on the right-hand side of that visual array. But in making the choice, they don't provide as their reason the location of the object. They provide as their reason some other feature of the object. And when we looked at, in the second lecture, the confabulation results, whereby subjects who had undergone commiserectomy, that is, whose corpus callosum had been severed so that the right and left hemispheres of their brains weren't in communication, we discovered that when they performed an act that was based on stimulation of the right brain, the left brain, which is the linguistic part, came up with an explanation for what they were doing that was obviously not the real source of their behavior. So there are many cases, Green points out, where our motivations are opaque to us, where we think we're responding to one thing, but in fact we're responding to something else. One of those cases, says Green, is the difference in our response to the Fat Man case and to the bystander case.
Okay.
So what happens in the bystander case, where we're trying to decide whether to shift the trolley from the 5 to the 1, is that our rational processing system gets activated.
Okay.
Whereas what happens, hypothesizes Green, and we'll give some evidence in a minute, what happens in the Fat Man case is that our emotional processing system gets activated.
Bro, are you telling me I have no emotions at all? This is... Okay.
And, says Green, given the choice between our rational system and our emotional system, the rational system is the one whose outputs we ought to trust. So, says Green, the morally right thing to do in this case is to push the Fat Man.
Yes.
Notice that this is a multi-step argument.
Not morally
some
right.
Of whose
it's a moral
premises
right.
are a good deal more
It's a moral right to push the Fat Man.
So the premise that our motivations are often opaque to us is completely undisputed by everyone. There's no question that often we aren't aware of what's causing us to respond in a particular way. I may be particularly irritable because my feet are wet, and unaware of the fact that the reason that I'm responding to you in a short-tempered way is not because you are particularly irritating, but because my feet are uncomfortable. This phenomenon is undeniable.
Okay.
The question of whether what actually explains our different responses in these two cases is an interesting empirical question. And there has been collected over the last decade or so some pretty interesting neuroimaging data suggesting that there are systematic activation differences in what goes on when people give utilitarian responses to cases and what goes on when people give responses to cases that seem to involve the sorts of notions to which deontologists appeal, notions like rights. And there is a certain amount of additional evidence coming from other research that the areas that are differentially activated in those two cases correspond on the one hand with what is often thought of as a rational processing system, a calculative processing system, whereas in the other, they correspond with areas of the brain that have been in independent cases implicated in emotional processing. So the first premise is uncontroversial. The second premise is reasonably well supported. There's controversy about the data, but there is scientific evidence for which there's a good argument to be made that what it shows is roughly what's written here. The controversial question is whether, even if the first two premises are true, the third normative premise is true.
Is true, yeah.
Is it the case that if our responses to Fat Man are triggered by emotion, whereas our responses to bystander are triggered by the rational system, is it the case that we ought to go with the rational system?
Not at all.
That is a normative claim, not an empirical one. And even if the arguments that we're going to consider in a minute successfully establish the truth of the second premise,
that's a normative claim, not an empirical one. Yeah, true,
not an empirical one. And even if the arguments that we're going to consider in a minute successfully establish the truth of the second premise, we don't yet have the truth of the third premise thereby established. So let's talk about the evidence that Green has found in favor of the second premise, in favor of the premise that what goes on in cases like Fat Man is an emotional response, whereas what goes on in cases like classic bystander is a rational response. So Green has, for the last decade or so, put people into fMRI machines, into scanners, which track where blood is flowing in the brain, and presented them in the scanners with three kinds of dilemmas. The first kind of dilemma are dilemmas that he calls moral personal dilemmas. These are dilemmas like Fat Man, where you're being asked whether you want to push the fat man off the bridge. Dilemmas like the doctor case, which I presented, where we're considering whether to cut up a healthy patient to save the lives of others. Dilemmas like a lifeboat case, where there's not enough food and water to go around on the lifeboat, and you're considering whether to throw off one of the people on the lifeboat so as to leave enough food and water to go around for the remaining subjects. So that's the first class of cases that he has subjects consider in the scanner. The second class of cases that he has people consider in the scanner are what he calls moral and impersonal cases. So these are cases like bystander at the switch, where you're facing a moral dilemma, but not one where you are imagining in an up-close and personal way, causing particular harm to a particular individual who's in your proximity. Cases like ones where you found a lost wallet and you need to decide whether to return it. Cases where you're voting on a policy that will have certain kinds of effects on people, but where those effects are relatively remote from you. And finally, he presents people with what he calls non-moral dilemmas. Questions like, if I'm trying to get from Cleveland to Chicago, should I take the bus or the train or a plane? Or if I'm trying to decide which coupon to use on the internet to save on shipping, should I do this or that? Cases that involve the same kinds of objects, right? Fat Man involves trains, bus versus train involves trains. We might have a coupon use case where you're using the coupon to buy a boat. Lifeboat involves a boat. So he has the subjects in the scanner, and they're presented with these sorts of cases. And you'll notice that I've put a little color-coded box here of black, gray, and white. What Green discovered in the 2001 paper, and let me say some of these data have since been reanalyzed, so some of the details haven't held up, but many of them have. What he discovered is that if one believes, as many do, that the brain areas listed here, brain areas like medial frontal gyrus and angular gyrus and posterior cingulate gyrus, if one believes that those are areas associated with emotion, then we have good evidence that in the moral personal cases, the areas of the brain associated with emotion are activated, whereas in the moral impersonal and non-moral cases, that doesn't occur. By contrast, it looks like a bunch of areas that are traditionally associated with working memory, parietal lobe, middle frontal gyrus, are more active in the impersonal case and the non-moral case than they are in the personal case. And here's the famous image from Green's 2001 paper, reproduced in many papers since, that shows the brain areas that exhibit differential response in the moral personal cases as contrasted with the other
emotion
cases.
And all that in different parts of the brain.
It looks like there is some, perhaps decisive, evidence in favor of Green's second premise, in favor of the premise that what goes on in moral personal cases is an activation of the part of the brain.
It's kind of wild that almost everyone who has watched Discovery or Animal Planet has been indirectly exposed to this. Sorry, not Animal Planet, Discovery. Maybe someone who watches the History Channel? I don't know. Do they show anything besides drama and porn stars and whatever? Porn stars. You know? And ancient aliens and whatever. I'll try to find all these papers and link them in my doc. It'll be an interesting read. Let's proceed.
Associated with emotion, whereas what goes on in cases like bystander is an activation of the part of the brain associated with reasoning and other sorts of more controlled processes. Moreover, says Green, there's lots and lots of behavioral evidence that supports the hypothesis that one of the things that goes on when we respond to hypothetical moral dilemmas is that we track features of the case that are not morally relevant. So, for example, there's a study from the early 2000s by behavioral economists Small and Lowenstein that points out that in a very profound sense, identifiable victims produce in us more powerful emotional responses than non-identifiable victims. And this isn't just the difference between a picture of the child to whom your Oxfam donations will go versus a description of the child to whom your Oxfam donations will go. There is, in fact, a strikingly large difference between people's willingness to give some of their rewards in a game in a laboratory to person number 4, right? So they draw a name from a hat, and it says person number 4. Then, in cases where they're told, decide how much money you want to give to the person whose number you're about to draw from the hat. In no instance, in neither of these instances, do they know who person number 4 is going to be. But the fact that in the first case, the person they draw from the hat, and it says person number 4, and they think, oh, I'll give this amount of my proceeds to the person. Whereas in the second case, they decide what amount of proceeds they want to give to the person whose number they are about to draw. The fact that that produces in subjects consistently different responses suggests to Green, and perhaps to others of you, that perhaps using our intuitions about these sorts of cases to build our moral theories may not be the best way to proceed.
No shit,
presumably, there are few of you who think that there's a relevant moral difference between whether you know the number of the person to whom you're going to be giving the gift, or whether you're about to find out the number of the person to whom you're going to be giving the gift. Something else that appears to affect our moral responses to cases.
I really like
If you're asked to decide how much punishment you want to give to somebody, this is work done by John Heiss, author of the Happiness Hypothesis, with various collaborators. If you're deciding how much punishment to give somebody, if you're deciding how wrong an act was, if you have been induced to feel disgust, either by sitting at a dirty table or by having been trained to associate certain terms with disgust through a kind of hypnotic suggestion, you will be harsher in punishing people for their misdeeds. Now, I take it that most of you don't think people deserve harsher punishment when you are feeling disgust because the table in front of you is dirty. I take it you think that how bad an act is that somebody else has done is independent of your feelings of disgust. But it looks like one of the things that condemnation tracks is that feeling. And in a minute, I'll talk about how that connects to Sunstein's more general discussion of heuristics. Finally, some work by David Pizarro, a Yale PhD, suggests that in specific trolley cases, we can get people's intuitions to move around in cases like Fat Man just by varying what most people would say are morally irrelevant features of the situation. In particular, Pizarro presents subjects with two different versions of the Fat Man case. In the first, you're asked whether it is morally permitted, required, or prohibited to push a man named Tyrone Payton off the bridge in order to save 100 members of the New York Philharmonic. And in the second, you're asked whether it's morally acceptable to push a man named Chip Ellsworth III off the bridge to save 100 members of the Harlem Jazz Orchestra. So the question is whether pushing a white man off the bridge to save 100 people of African descent, or pushing a black man off the bridge to save 100 people of European descent, should produce different responses. And interestingly, perhaps as the result of a certain kind of self-correction, liberals say it is less morally acceptable to push Tyrone Payton off the bridge than to produce Chip Ellsworth. Regardless of which direction the numbers come out, what's interesting is the numbers come out differently, tracking a feature which most of us would think isn't a morally relevant feature. So it looks like strengthening Green's second premise, and this is an argument that he makes in more detail in a paper from which we'll read excerpts after the break called The Secret Joke of Kant's Soul. It looks like there's pretty good reason to think at least some of our responses to these cases are tracking features which we wouldn't reflectively endorse. And Green thinks in particular, in Fat Man, our reluctance to push the fat man off the bridge is tracking one of those morally irrelevant features. Deontological judgments, says Green, those where we're unwilling to make the utilitarian move. Deontological judgments, says Green, are driven by emotional responses. Consequentialist judgments are driven by cognitive ones. And the deontological responses, he says, lack moral significance. In fact, deontology itself is a kind of moral confabulation.
What?
I'm going to give Kant the last word in this lecture. So those of you who are crying for the sage of Königsberg, realize that he will get the very last word in today's lecture, complete with a beautiful image of his face.
Let me.
To push a man named
Let me give this
Tyrone
man
Payton
a fair chance, because this man said something completely retarded. Yo, what
off the
did
bridge
he
in order to
just say?
save 100 members of the New York Philharmonic.
And
in the second, you're asked whether it's morally acceptable a black man off the bridge to save 100 people of European descent should produce different responses. And interestingly, perhaps as the result of a certain kind of self-correction, liberals say it is less morally... So it looks like strengthening Green's second premise, and this is an argument that he makes in more detail in...
Who is this guy, Green?
Of the problem by causing you to assimilate bystander to fat man. So famously, people are more likely to choose an object that lies on the left-hand side of a visual array.
Okay, yeah, I understood this.
Dilemmas like the doctor case, which I think are wet. And perhaps to others of you, that perhaps using our is independent of your feelings of disgust. Finally, some work by David Pizarro, a Yale PhD, suggests that in specific trolley cases, we can get people's intuitions to move around in cases like Fat Man just by varying what most people would say are morally irrelevant features of the situation. In particular...
Who is Pizarro? Who the fuck? Who asked, bro? This is fucking retarded. What? Nobody... No liberal would be like, yeah, I'll kill a fat guy. I'll kill a like a white man over a black man. Practically, in real life. Yeah, on a fucking bullshit survey they mind, but what kind of a bullshit theory is that?
Morally permitted, required, or prohibited to push a man named Tyrone Payton off the bridge in order to save 100 members of the New York Philharmonic. And in the second, you're asked whether it's morally acceptable to push a man named Chip Ellsworth III off the bridge to save 100 members of the Harlem Jazz.
Push them both, kill them.
So the question is whether pushing a white man off the bridge to save 100 people of African descent, or pushing a black man off the bridge to save 100 people of your...
You're saving 100 people. Push them both. Push them both. If both are standing, push them both. I don't care. Even if one guy stops the train, maybe if you push the other one, maybe you will do some good. Who cares? Push them both. Even if the train stops, push them both. Who cares? What kind of a fucking retarded fucking bullshit is this?
Perhaps as a result of a certain kind of self-correction, liberals say it is less morally acceptable to push Tyrone Payton off the bridge than to produce Chip Ellsworth.
Man, scientists like this just come into politics and be like, yo, look at this. People have different philosophy. You retarded fucking bullshit. Stick to your lane, motherfucker.
Direction the numbers come out. What's interesting is the
Fucking doctors going into research, doing politics. Motherfuckers.
numbers come out differently, tracking a feature which most of us would think is like
Shut
pretty
up.
good. And
Shut up.
in particular,
Shut up.
deontological cases are
What
tracking
did
features
Green
which we wouldn't
think?
reflectively
What did
endorse.
fucking Green think?
A paper from which we'll read excerpts after the break called The Secret Joke of Kant's Soul. It looks like there's pretty good...
What?
So it looks like strengthening Green's second premise, and this is an argument that he makes in more detail in thing is the numbers come out differently, tracking a feature which most can premise, and this is an argument that he makes in more detail in paper from which we'll read excerpts after the break called The Secret Joke of Kant's Soul. It looks like there's pretty good reason to think
Green is a fucking retard. So are all of his friends. So are all of his fucking bullshit fucking kids or whatever. I hope his fucking seed dies so that his genetics cannot pass on to fucking other people. What the fuck? What the fuck is this fucking retarded bullshit example? A liberal would kill a white man over a black man. Okay, even if the white guy is like a fucking royal chips hands with the third or whatever. No. Secret Joke of Console. Fucking Green is a fucking joke name.
At least some of our responses to these cases are tracking features which we wouldn't reflectively endorse, and those morally irrelevant. Judgments, says Green, are driven by emotional responses. Consequentialist judgments are driven by cognitive ones, and the deontological responses, he says, lack moral significance. In fact,
all of these are retarded
is
arguments.
A kind of moral confabulation.
I don't even know if different brain fucking different parts of the brain have different fucking bullshit. This special parts of the brain have special special things to do, but yeah, the brain is not divided between it. This is the part, this is the emotional continent, this is the part where we handle emotions, this is the part where we handle bullshit. Even if we cut half the brain off, you'll still live with both emotional responses and rational responses. What the fuck?
Kant, the last word in this lecture. So those of you who are crying for the sage of Königsberg, realize that he will get the very last word in today's lecture complete with a beautiful image of his face.
Thank you.
But before I do that, I want to spend the final 10 substantive minutes of the lecture talking you through...
I cannot believe I let this motherfucker slip by. Green. I'll fucking write a headpiece on him in my notes.
Namely, Cass Sunstein's article.
Retard.
So Sunstein, in somewhat similar vein to Green, though drawing on a slightly different literature, argues that a good portion of our moral reasoning operates in exactly the same way that our regular reasoning does, namely by making use of heuristics, which we know about from the lecture on January 20th on dual processing. Heuristics are fast and frugal tools for dealing with the complexity of the world when we're faced with time-sensitive decision-making tasks. And the way that heuristics work is really smart. They work by means of something called attribute substitution. We're interested in a target attribute, something that's relatively hard to find out about the world, and we focus our attention instead on a heuristic attribute, something that's relatively easy to find out about the world. So some of you may make use of this when you're trying to distinguish your telephone from other people's telephones. The target attribute, the thing you're really interested in, is this my phone? Something which you're only going to be able to determine by turning on the phone and looking to see whether the numbers in it are the numbers that you've placed into it, let's say. But you might make your life easy by putting a cover on your phone or a sticker on your phone or some surface feature on your phone that will let you find your phone quickly and well. Right? So you're going to make use of an easy-to-find attribute rather than a difficult-to-determine attribute. In general, this is an extraordinarily good way to navigate the world. Target and heuristic attributes generally coincide. That's how the heuristic attributes came to be the ones which you're using as the markers of the target. And it takes much less effort to process surface features of the world than to spend your time working through the details of each of the things that you want to make sense of. So I observed myself this morning making use of a target attribute on my way into school. I was stopped at a stoplight, and I noticed out of the corner of my eye that the car next to me had started to move. Now, obviously, the attribute in which I was interested in was whether the light had turned green. But because I couldn't quite see the green light from where I was sitting, I was able to use instead the motion of the car next to me as an indicator of the thing.
As an indicator, yeah.
Now, of course, the heuristic could have misfired.
Oh shit, we are in another segment. Supposed to turn this down. I got too heated. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those things about that guy, whoever he was. I think he contributed a lot to whatever his field was. I shouldn't pass childish judgments like this and have tantrums like a little fucking child. I apologize, Mr. Green. Anyway, is this guy even alive? Who am I talking to?
Been that car was moving even though the light was still red. It could have been that car was moving in the left lane and had a special light that I didn't. But for the most part, we make use of heuristics all the time and they help us. Now, Sunstein's argument is that in non-moral cases, people often use heuristics, that though these are useful, they may also lead to errors, and that in moral cases, people often use heuristics as well.
Mm-hmm.
But just as they may lead to errors in the non-moral cases, so too may they lead to errors in the moral cases. And in particular, he thinks they do in a number of cases that he goes on to discuss. So, for example, and I realize, I think we're going to close. I said Kant would get the last word, but Kant's going to get the last word on Thursday. We're going to go through Sunstein and one of the examples, and then we'll get to Kant. So Sunstein points out, for example, that there's a heuristic called the availability heuristic. That's a heuristic that says, look, I'm trying to figure out how likely something is to happen, and here's a good way to determine how likely something is to happen. I think about how easy it is for me to think of cases where that did happen. So whenever I'm worried that my children are going to be kidnapped, I think for myself, how many friends do I know whose children were kidnapped?
By the way, these were the three, the altercations to the trolley problem, right? There was this guy, whoever, Thompson, yeah? Thompson was like, yeah, put yourself on the track and see how your responses would vary. And then there was Green, who was like, yeah, different parts of the brain, you have different inclinations, different people will choose different things. And here's the part of the brain that in some fucking dipshit neuroscientist. Some neuroscientists, dipshit research, it showed some neuroscientists, old research showed that this guy was, correct. And he was like, he carried it with him and was like, yeah, the joke of Kant's soul. Look at my book, buy it, so that I can die a rich philosopher, I guess. And this is the third guy, Sunstein. He's yet about to tell what his response is. Hope it's a good one. I'm so triggered. Why am I triggered? Why am I so triggered?
How many people do I know whose children were kidnapped? And when I discover that the answer is none, I relax. This kind of heuristic is often correct, but it can lead us astray. Suppose,
philosophical puzzles. I'll
you're
watch about 10 minutes into this.
Likely, whether there are more words in the English language that end in ing, or more words in the English language whose second to last letter is n.
Okay.
More words that end in ing, or more words whose second to last letter is n.
I have no idea.
It's much easier to think of words that end with ing, and so people tend to say that there are more words ending in ing than words whose second to last letter is n.
True.
But of course, every word that ends with ing is a word whose second to last letter is n.
Exactly.
You've been bamboozled by the availability heuristic.
No.
Suppose you make use of what's sometimes called the representative heuristic, that the probability of something occurring tracks its degree of typicality. This too is often correct. What it is to be a typical instance
People
is
just
to be one of the
suck at
instances that
abstract
occurs
thinking.
more frequently. But as you know from the Linda the Bank Teller case or the farmer with a tractor case, if I ask you of a random resident of Iowa, whether it's more likely that that resident is a farmer or...
even though I say that it's, morally permissible to kill, the bystander, I don't know if I was actually standing there and I would be presented with this choice, over... I would actually feel the same at that time. So yeah, he is right. We kind of think it in terms of some kind of a thought experiment. Yeah, okay, I'm there. What is morality? Isolate everything, cut off everything, and microanalyze, But when you're there and everything is a whole, things run different. Maybe you pull the lever and the track doesn't switch and 5 people die anyway. Maybe you push the fat man and he falls right, on the right side of the tracks or the left side of the tracks, and the fat man dies because you pushed him off the bridge, and the people also die because the train runs over them. So, yeah, it's not so simple, I guess.
A farmer with a tractor.
Mm-hmm.
The representative heuristic is going to draw you towards saying that it's more likely that the person is a farmer with a tractor. But obviously, every farmer with a tractor is also a farmer.
Yes.
Now, remember that Sunstein's arguments for 1 and 2 are easy to make because we have an independent way of determining whether somebody has made an error in those cases. We can see what went wrong in the availability heuristic and in the representative heuristic because we can see that it is, in fact, more likely that the second to last letter of a word is N than it is that the last 3 letters of the word are ING. We can see that it's more likely that somebody's a farmer than it is that somebody's a farmer with a tractor.
With a tractor.
Because in both of those cases, one of them is a special instance of the other.
Yes.
Sunstein's argument for moral heuristics is going to take more steps because it's not enough for him to show what will establish that in moral cases people often use heuristics. He's also going to need to show that in so doing, they're making mistakes.
Mistakes, yes,
the question of how we get an independent handle on what it is to make a mistake is a rather
these people,
complicated
these neurotypicals, I call them neurotypicals, neuroscientists. Okay, maybe they are also neurotypical. Anyway, these people, this green guy, he was not neurotypical.
But let's first think about what his argument in favor of the claim that in moral cases people often use heuristics is. And I'm going to close today's lecture with 2 examples that he gives, and then we'll begin on Thursday by running through some particular cases where I'll ask you to respond. So one of the examples that he provides is, again, some work by Jonathan Haidt on a phenomenon known as moral dumbfounding. As you know from reading Sunstein's paper, people often respond to the question, is it morally acceptable to engage, for a brother and sister, to engage in consensual, harm-free, sibling, incestuous relations, by saying that it is morally unacceptable.
Cowards,
but when asked
stupid,
to provide reasons for
morons,
that, subjects find it difficult to do so.
All of them
Likewise,
are morons.
Many people are inclined to think there's something morally problematic about wiping the floor of your bathroom.
Dude, do it. Just do it. Morality is such a cope, bro. It's not morally acceptable. Why? No reason, bro. It's just not. I said so. That's why. Fuck you.
Or about eating your dog if he's been hit by a car. But they find it difficult to articulate what their reasons are for those responses. Sunstein suggests the reason is...
Listen, eat the meat, stuff the dog with the, all of that prosthetic bullshit. Skin your dog. You can eat the meat. You get a mannequin or whatever. All of the... How do they turn dogs into, after they die, they stuff dogs with wax or whatever. Okay, do that. Keep the dog on your house. Or bury the dog skin or whatever. With the bones or whatever. I'm talking out of my ass. What am I doing? But yeah, you can eat the meat, right? It won't be too bad. Technically, couldn't you eat human meat and be like, yeah, the skin outside? No. If you eat human, no, you can eat it. Holy shit. Fuck. Well, do that too. Who cares?
Extension of heuristics. Likewise, he points out, in moral framing cases, and we'll start with this next lecture, cases like the Asian disease case that I presented you with in our lecture on January 20th, whether you present a moral dilemma as involving lives saved, or by contrast, lives lost, even when those are just complementary descriptions of the same outcome, people are likely to have different responses.
True.
And Sunstein concludes on that basis that people make use of heuristics in moral reasoning,
just as they do
in
non-moral reasoning. Yeah,
we'll begin on Thursday with Sunstein's discussion of those cases and then we'll let Content
We'll do that
get the
right
last
now.
words in the trolley debate.
We cannot
I'll
wait
see you
till
then.
Thursday. We'll do that
I
right
want
now.
to start out by finishing up the discussion that we began
Let's
last
finish
class
that.
about ways of
Wait a minute. Let me find better music because this is frying my brain here. What about you? Nope. Okay. I need some kind of a, you know. Okay. Humanity, turn it up, rise up. Okay, this one. Give me some music and let me relax just a bit.
Can you try to understand how a touch can cause explosions? I'm so great to be landed.
Okay, I hope this picks up because this is not good. This is not good. This is below mid. No, no. This just feels cheap, soulless. It feels like it was created by a machine and not a good machine. Even if it was done by a good machine, even if it was done by a good algorithm, it would be good. But this feels like trash. Maybe this will help. Okay. Give me. Hit me.
So I've come to the conclusion.
Okay, let me relax a bit. This is such a cringe. Why do people? It's a good clickbait, I guess. It's a good thumbnail.
See, I just want to be able to
Give me this one music break so that I can restart my brain for that last segment, you know?
Please strike me thunder. Let me get closer to them. Please strike me thunder. So I can be great.
It's not that good. This is not that good.
So I've come
This.
to the
Dubstep is supposed to be better than this. No. This is actually. This kind of alright. No, it turned into trash. I thought it was gonna be something better. Give me this. So what do I need for the trolley problem? I need the doctor, all the studies. I need to find all the studies, the 3 studies, the examples, and the additional, the hypotheticals that were added, right? The 3 explanations by these guys. I wonder. Is this just music? There's no way this is just music, right? Okay, for this drop. This music used to... This was pretty popular when... How old is this? 3 years, right? Yeah, when TikTok was released in India before they banned, this was pretty widely used in those one of those TikTok trends. Yeah. Then the yeah, da 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 da, like that. Yes. This is this is Khan's book. What else? I wonder if these will come back, you know? Who are these bots? Who are these bots? Are these supposed to be people? Who would enjoy music?
Of thinking about the perplexity that the Trolley case gives rise to. And you'll remember that the perplexity that the Trolley case gives rise to is that there's an apparent asymmetry in our responses to the bystander case and the Fat Man case, even though both of them seem arguably to involve killing one in order to save five. And we looked last class at Judy Thompson's response, which says, look, there's no asymmetry in the two cases, because when we reflect on the additional hypothetical case where there's a third track on which you yourself are standing, we come to recognize that it's not morally acceptable to turn in bystander, just as it's not morally acceptable to push in Fat Man. At the other extreme, we looked at Josh Green's response, which was that just as it's morally acceptable to turn the trolley in bystander, it's morally acceptable to push the man in Fat Man. And to the extent that we're getting differential responses in those cases, says Green, it's due to the fact that the emotional part of our brain response mechanisms is activated by the up-close and personal nature of the Fat Man case. And as a result, we give an answer that he thinks remains morally unjustified. And what we started to think about at the end of last lecture was a third possibility, which lies somewhere in between the Thompson and the Green, though closer to the Green. And that's Cass Sunstein's argument that though our responses differ, and perhaps differ in ways that will be impossible for us to change, the cases are the same deep down. And he's inclined, though not as certain as Josh Green is, to think that if we want the cases to come together, what we ought to do is to push the Fat Man. And you'll recall that his argument there proceeded as follows. He suggested that in non-moral cases, it's uncontroversial that we make use of heuristics, and that those heuristics, though useful, frequently lead us to errors. And then went on to contend that just as this occurs in non-moral cases, so too does it occur in moral cases. And we left at the end of last class thinking about what goes on in Sunstein's argument that in moral cases, people often use heuristics. And you'll recall that he gave a couple of examples from Jonathan Haidt's work of cases where people were morally expressing moral disapprobation towards actions for which they could find no justification. So consensual incest between siblings, cleaning your bathroom floor with the American flag. People were inclined to find those morally problematic, and to find them morally problematic even when, if pushed, they were unable to articulate what moral rule those things violated. And what Sunstein suggests in the paper is that in general, we can look at the heuristics and biases literature.
This is the thing. If Green was right, okay, people would find incest would not be an actual thing, right? Because people would always find it disgusting to cope with your sister, because it's not socially permissible and you grow up in a society like that. But people don't do that, right? So Green is wrong. Green is the most retarded fucking piece of shit I've ever. Why did I hear his? It's like I heard an example from Reddit. Sorry, Reddit is actually give better analogies. It's like I heard an example from Twitter, you know.
and see instance after
it's
instance
so
where the
bad.
framing of a
It's so
case affects our response to the case in ways that they do in non-moral cases, in moral cases as well. So you'll recall that in the third lecture, we were, right when we were learning how to use our clickers, which I should tell you, we're going to use a bit in this lecture, so you should take out your clickers. When we were first starting to learn our clickers, we were presented with the famous Asian disease case, which is the case that runs as follows. A terrible disease has struck 600 people in your town, right? So there's 600 people in your town who are destined to die. You're the mayor and 2 courses of treatment are available, plan A or plan B. And I asked half of you to look at the green side of the description, which says that plan A is the one where 200 people will live, whereas plan B is one where there's a 1/3 probability that 600 will live and a 2/3 probability that no one will live. And the other half of you looked at the exact same plans, but described not in terms of who will live, but in terms of who will die. So plan A says 200 of the 600 people will live, which means 400 will die. And here plan A means 400 of the 600 people will die, which means 200 of the people will live. Nonetheless, and this was our very first clicker response, the attitudes that you had towards the cases differed, whereas when it was presented as the number of people who will live, 66% of you went with plan A and only 34% with plan B. When we inverted the framing, the numbers came out exactly the opposite. So 66 of you favored plan A in the green case, 64 of you favored plan A in the blue case, but plan A and plan B are mathematically identical.
True.
So perhaps something like this is what's going on in the trolley cases. And this is not a real clicker example, but imagine you were presented with the following case. A terrible trolley is hurtling down the track towards 6 people in your town. You're the mayor, and 2 courses for the trolley are available for you, plan A and plan B. And then I present you plan A, 1 person will be spared, which means, of course, that 5 people will die.
1 person
or plan
will
B,
die.
that 1 person will die, which means, of course, that 5 people will be spared. And there's an inclination, I think, to go with plan B in the blue case and plan A in the A case, and this generalizes. Depending on who we're focusing on in these moral dilemmas, we have different responses to them. If we think about Josh Green's crying baby case, where you're locked in a basement with 19 others and your crying baby, surrounded by enemy soldiers who will kill you if you are found, the dilemma that Green presents subjects with is, should you smother the baby, who's
The baby is really, really easy. It's like, did Josh Green, who is this Green? Josh Green. Josh. This is the guy. This is the guy. Count joke. Count soul joke. Joshua Green, the secret joke of console. Okay. This guy, right? Does he have kids? This fucking retard. You can easily silence a crying kid. You just have to put your fucking thumb into its mouth and chill on its tongue very lightly. It will stop crying. It will suck on your thumb. It's like an animal. Don't be so stupid. More on thinking, high level conversation, blah, 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 blah. He studies at Harvard, right? Yeah, all Harvard. Everybody who studies at Harvard is a psychopath or a sociopath or something else. Look at this guy. What the fuck? Looks like a pedophile. Who else? Complex thought. I probably shouldn't call. Just. I take that back. I'm sorry. He looks like a nice guy, but whatever. Kind of a fucking response is that? I kind of think that, let's say every other university just fucking spontaneously catches fire, and Harvard is the only thing that's left. The economics, the philosophy, all of that is now taught by Harvard professors, and Harvard, Harvard students learn all of it, and they are the future, right? The future is fucked. They're all retards. What the fuck are we supposed to do? Department of Psychology. What are we supposed to do? Joshua Green. Go back. Joshua Green. Let's go. I'll dox this fucker. Is an American experimental psychologist, neuroscience, and a philosopher. I don't care if I'm going on a tangent. The video's already over. I'm like at the last segment. After this, if anyone watching, although no one watches, if anyone watching is annoyed, links are in the description. Go watch it yourself. He earned a Green attended a high school in Fort Lauderdale, Broward County, Florida. He briefly attended the bachelor's degree in philosophy from Harvard in 1997, followed by a PhD in philosophy at Princeton. Okay. Just served on his dissertation committee. Terrible, no good, very bad, truthful, morality, and what? Moral realism. Another fucking retarded bullshit. Fucking thing. Okay. Engage in development for non-realist utilitarianism. Mm. Seeking the right answer to they cannot both be right, and therefore everyone involved ought to seek out the right answer to resolve the disagreement. Contrary theories of metaethics have been formulating the statement this moral belief is wrong, and so they cannot resolve disagreements in this way. Okay. Where's this guy? Let's get back. Non-realist utilitarianism is a better framework for resolving disagreements. Green served as a postdoctoral fellow at Princeton in neuroscience of cognitive control and laboratory before returning to Harvard in 2006 as an assistant professor. In 2011, he became John and as professor associate of the social sciences, professor of psychology. Okay, process theory. Have advanced a dual process theory of moral judgment, suggesting that moral judgments, emotional responses, and controlled conscious reasoning by, in particular, Green argues that central tension in ethics between deontology, rights or duty-based moral theories, and consequentialism. What reflects the competing influences of these two types of processes. Characteristically, deontological judgments are preferentially supposed to be automatic emotional responses, while characteristically consequentialist judgments are preferentially supported by conscious reasoning and allied processes of cognitive control. In one of these first experiments to suggest a moral dual processing mode. What is this? With emotion that were not activated by judgments that were more impersonal. Whether they pull a switch, trolley, whatever, okay. The two dilemmas, personal moral questions, okay. And those who did make the intuitively unappealing choice had longer reaction times than those who made the emotional pleasant decision. Well, no shit. Okay. A follow-up study compared easy personal moral questions to which subjects had fast reaction times and hard dilemmas like for bridge problem, to which they had slow reaction times. In responding to hard problems, subjects displayed increased activity in the whatever and whatever. In this comparison demonstrated that harder problems activated different brain regions, but it didn't prove differential activity same moral problem depending on the answer. This was done in the second part of the study, in which authors showed that for a given question, those subjects who made the utilitarian choices did have higher activity. Non-utilitarian choices. These two studies were correlational, but the others suggested a casual impact of emotional versus cognitive processing on deontological versus utilitarian arguments. A 2008 study by Green showed that cognitive load caused subjects to take longer to respond when they made a utilitarian moral judgment, but had no effect on the response time when they made a non-utilitarian judgment, suggesting that the utilitarian thought processes require extra cognitive effort. In 2008 article, Joke of Kant's Soul argues that Kant is best understood as a rationalization than rationalism. I attempt to justify intuitive moral judgments post hoc. This guy, how do people like these become pioneers in fields like these? Such a retarded thing to say. And no one other than philosophers have critical responses. No doctors, no other psychologists, no one else. Evolutionary psychology, another fucking cancer bullshit. All of this is cancer. Evolutionary psychologist, utilitarian. He's like an animal, whatever. Thomas Nagel critiques the book by suggesting Green is too quick to conclude utilitarianism, especially from the general goal of constructing an impartial morality. For example, he says Immanuel Kant and John Rawls offer impartial approaches to ethical questions. Robert Wright calls Green's proposal for global harmony ambitious and adds, I like ambition, but he also claims that people have a tendency to see facts in a way that serves their in-group, even if there is no disagreement about the underlying moral principles. Here's the problem. Here's the thing. Okay. Let's say you are like, Kant is retarded. Utilitarian response is the way to go forward, right? On what basis? You could argue, yeah, utility of your consequence, of whatever consequence you want. How is that consequence better than someone else's, right? If I say, let's say there is a car, okay? There's a car on the road, and I have a utilitarian, I have a utilitarian way of, pulling the car. Okay. I have a I have two utilitarians, okay? Let's say the first utilitarian is like the car is in the middle of the road. We have to pull it to the right side. The other guy was, no, we have to pull it to the left side. How do you choose which guy is correct? The utility of pulling the car to one side is correct. But how do you differentiate? How do you measure which action they both take? If it takes both of them to push the car, how do you know? Right? You could say, let's say you're in America, so you push the car to the right. Let's say you're in Britain, so you push the car to the left. But let's say it's just a road, it's an abandoned road. Let's say ducks are crossing and they want to cross. They are going along the road, a row of infinite ducks, and you have to move your car. How do you? You have to emphasize utilitarianism with some kind of an emotional. There is an emotional trigger behind every utilitarian action. Otherwise, there is no point to insisting on the utility of whatever consequence you want. What the fuck is your logic? What the fuck is this logic? Circular. This logic is trash. Scythe study in which people were randomly divided into two groups and immediately favored members of their own group allocating resources. Assignment was random. Instead, nourishing the seeds of enlightenment indigenous to the world's tribes is a better bet than trying to convert all these tribes to utilitarianism. Both Green's meta-morality of deep pragmatism has recently been criticized by Stephen Krajewald. If I am to do one thing in life, I have made it my mission to crush utilitarian retards into submission and make them cry. All of them. What a fucking trash philosophy. Holy shit. Oh my god. How can someone be utilitarian and human at the same time? You should forgo your human rights if you're utilitarian. Yo. Okay. What is this moral tribes? Green posits that humans have an instinctive automatic tendency to cooperate with social group uh, on the tragedy of common scenarios, me versus us. For example, a cooperative investment game, people are more likely to do what's best for their group when they're under time pressure or they're primed to go with their gut, and inversely, cooperation can be inhibited by rational calculation. However, on the questions of intergroup harmony, us versus them, yes. And this guy is like determinism. He's a huge determinist and a huge utilitarianist and hence a huge cunt. And plus, he's educated and has high status. That's why he's a cunt. I don't even have anything. Can I read his book? Console, whatever it is. Where is it? Come on, MIT. It's not pay. It's not paywall content because it's trash content. Come on, give it to me. There is no way. Oh my God. Dude. Okay. No. I'm clicking on wrong things, right? Nope. Nope. Moral psychology. Okay. Let me, because I want to read it. What does he say? It's such a retarded thing to say. Come on, control me. Moral realism is not that bad. It's a half-baked philosophy, but it's not that bad. There's nothing worse than utilitarianism. The secret joke of 58 pages, bro. I give up. Screw. He's right. I'm wrong. Guess.
Spies will call the soldiers with certainty to your hiding location and cause them to kill all 20 of you. So
Let's
very
finish
much like
this.
the Jim and the Indians case, but with an even more painful premise.
Okay.
If you focus your attention in that case to the experience of putting your hand over the mouth of your screaming child,
Put
it
your
is
thumb
virtually
into
impossible
his mouth
to judge that as
and
the thing that
silence
is
him.
morally required.
Learn
But if
how
you
to
redirect
handle
your
a
attention
child.
even-
If you're to carry a child, if you're to bear a child, know that you can silence a child without killing it. You fucking.
a tiny bit towards the 2-year-old next to you and the 4-year-old next to her and the old man in the other corner of the room.
Dude, imagine the kid cries, both of you die. Of course, you have to kill the kid in that case.
All of whom will die if you don't take this action towards the baby. Your response to the case shifts. And the shiftiness in the direction of our attention is something that's going to be endemic to all of these kinds of cases. To some extent, we're able only to focus on part of the world at a time. And as a result of that, it's incredibly difficult to hold in focus in a way that makes them seem stable, these kinds of moral dilemmas. So Sunstein's suggestion is that this phenomenon, whereby features that have got to be morally irrelevant, right? It can't be morally relevant to what's the right thing to do in the trolley case, whether you frame it in terms of the number who will live or the number who will die. At least prima facie, that doesn't seem like the kind of thing that could be relevant. You're making exactly the same decision framed in two different ways. How could that be what makes the difference? Sunstein's suggestion is that the mechanism that underlies the phenomenon that I've just described happens over and over and over again, not just in hypothetical trolley problem style cases, but all the time in the kind of moral reasoning that we engage in as citizens of a democracy, trying to make judgments about distributions of resources, trying to make judgments about what sorts of laws should be put in place to regulate or incentivize certain kinds of behavior. So in each of the following 4 domains, says Sunstein, we very often focus on heuristic, that is the surface features of the phenomenon, rather than the target attributes, that is the thing that we ultimately care about. Remember, I talked last class about putting a skin on your phone so that it's easily recognizable. That gives you heuristic access to which phone is yours. But of course, that decoration on your phone is useful as a way of finding your phone only insofar as it tracks the target attribute that you care about, namely finding the phone which has in it the phone numbers that you care about having. And when targets and heuristics come apart, we're in trouble. So says Sunstein, when we're thinking about risk regulation, that is, what do we do with the
was I
fact that
muted?
as human
Holy
beings,
why?
lots and lots of the stuff
Why
we do
does
has the
this keep
potential for
happening?
causing.
Why do I keep muting myself and then forgetting I'm muted because of noise?
Harm, but we don't want
I'm just-
trouble. So says Sunstein,
I'm ending
when we're
the stream.
thinking about risk regulation,
Soon.
that is, what do we do with the fact that as human beings, lots and lots of the stuff we do has the potential for causing harm, but we don't want to spend our lives wrapped in large amounts of styrofoam, moving very
True.
slowly through the world so as not to bump into things. Given that we are willing to take risks, how is it that our tendency to use heuristics interacts with our regulation of them? In cases of punishment, and this is the first topic that we'll turn to after break, Sunstein thinks we use heuristics in ways that cause us to behave in counterproductive ways in punishing both individuals and aggregates.
Ooh.
In our hesitation to make certain kinds of choices in the area of
Bro,
reproductive
how
medicine,
do these nobodies make better arguments than a Harvard graduate? The Harvard graduate is supposed to be right because he has the best education and the best students and the best funding and best everything. But instead, it's random nobodies. And all Harvard graduates can do give bad arguments, bad science, bad everything. Even if you think about, let's say that, let's consider even social media. Facebook and Instagram are terrible. Terrible. What's going on in that school that everybody is just turning out is complete, trash? What's happening? It's supposed to be the best school.
Thanks, Sunstein, we risk mistaking the heuristics for the targets, and in taking the act-omission distinction so seriously, we risk mistaking heuristics for targets. So we'll turn to the issue of punishment right after break, and we'll turn to the issue of act-omission in the later part of the talk.
I'm not returning.
What I want to do right now is to run through 3 examples of risk regulation via Sunstein's analysis, and the third of these, I'm actually really curious, and so I want to see how the clicker numbers come out.
Okay, you know what?
Sunstein points out, and it seems to me that he's exactly right, that people are more likely to condemn a company when their behavior is described in ways that involve certainty than in ways that involve risk. So take company A, which produces a product that 10 million people use, which will kill 10 people. Of the 10 million people who make use of this product, 10 of them will have a reaction to it of a kind that will cause them to die. And the cost of eliminating that risk entirely would be $100 million. There is a feeling, an inclination at least on the part of many, to think that the company ought to spend its money getting rid of that risk, that it's unacceptable to produce a product where 10 people are going to die. By contrast, if you frame the case in terms of probabilities, that 10 million people use the product, that it produces a risk of death of 1 per million, and the risk elimination is exactly as costly, this is the sort of thing that we allow all the time.
See, here's the problem, okay? In one case, you're saying that the drug is killing people. In the second case, you're saying that people are dying during the process, okay? In one case, the drug is killing the person. In the other case, anything can kill the person. Maybe he has some other medical complication that he died. Maybe he had an allergic reaction that can be accounted for. But in the first case, the drug kills people, right?
Without this sort of risk tolerance, there would be no technological innovation, and most of the goods and resources that all of us have come to take for granted would never have come to be. So Sunstein's contention here,
if microwaves would give like 100 out of 1 people cancer, nobody would buy microwaves. I'm sorry. If some people just coincidentally have cancer and have microwaves, people are going to buy microwaves. It's that simple.
Is that though the target attributes are identical in the 2 cases, in this case, 10 people are going to die and saving them would have cost $100 million. In this case, 10 people are going to die and saving them would cost $100 million. The target attributes are identical. In both cases, 10 people die and saving them would cost the amount specified. The heuristic attributes differ. This one is framed in terms of certainty. This one is framed in terms of risk. And we have a very good heuristic that goes like this. If 10 people are going to die from what you're doing,
why is agency of thing being done not?
Don't do it. And Sunstein's contention is that the asymmetry in our response to these cases is irrational. Indeed, if we lifted this one to a risk of 2 deaths per million and had this one with a certainty of 10, people would still be inclined to go with the first choice.
Wait, what? 10 million people use product will kill 10 people, risk elimination 100 million, bad. 100 million people use the product kills 1 death per million, risk elimination 10 million acceptable. True, because 10 people are dying because of the drug. The product's risk 1 death per million is a statistical anomaly. Anything, it's a variable, bro. Anything can fit there, dude.
To condemn the first choice.
Why are these even being compared? Just bring on Kant and finish.
Even though
this.
In that case, these
arguments are retarded.
Worse one. So as a result of mistaking the heuristic attribute for the target one, we make mistakes.
It's not about heuristics. It's not about heuristics. This is a bad analogy if it's about heuristics.
Sunstein thinks that this is what's going on in the case of emissions trading, cap and trade, of which he was an early advocate. In the model of emissions trading, polluters get given a license to pollute n units of pollution into the air, and those licenses then get to be traded on the market in such a way that arguably there's less pollution at lower cost. Let's grant Sunstein the economics there. Even so, there is
polluters given license to pollute n units. Licenses can be traded on the market. Thankfully, we have a thing called Tesla. Tesla pollution units. It's so good that we have. Yes. Okay. So what? Oh my god, dude, give me a right-wing website so that I cannot. More polluting. What? South China Morning Post. Okay. Carbon. What? Carbon credits? Yeah. Carbon credits. It's called carbon credits. Yes. There we go. Okay. This is probably not, because this looks like a shill website. It's probably not ad blocked. Okay. Offset the carbon. Yeah. Oh my god. Carbon credit sales. Oh my god. Tesla is saving the world. Holy shit. Elon Musk. That just. Not just carbon credits. Net zero leader. Yeah. This is a glazing website. Okay. So what happens here is that Tesla, because they make EVs, they sell carbon credits to other companies. United States has this regulation that any company cannot pollute more than this. So Tesla just sells them carbon credits because they're a 100% EV company to other companies, and they don't get penalized because of pollution regulations. Tesla makes all the profits, and emissions trading, this example does not even work.
To cap and trade.
So this doesn't argument.
To concede that the
this
target
doesn't
attribute,
work.
Namely that we've
This
reduced the
does
amount
not
of
work.
pollution is present.
Yes,
The
it has this tendency. It has this tendency to be like that regulations credits kind of work, but they don't actually. If you're being honest, do credits actually work? I'll have to look into this, but I am almost 90% sure credits don't actually do anything.
People are paying to pollute. You shouldn't be able to pay your way out of serious wrongdoing. Strikes us as problematic. Now, it's an interesting phenomenon that resistance to this sort of reasoning happens to
Reconnection successful. Come back online. Oh my god, it worked. Holy shit.
You're just using a heuristic there.
Small f.
Both sides
No,
respond
capital F,
with
but
hostility to the smarty pants academic analysis. In the 1970s, it was common for advocates of the buildup of nuclear arsenals to make appeal to a notion called mutually assured destruction that we'll talk about when we talk about the prisoner's dilemma. The basic idea is that if both sides have enough weapons to knock the other side out, then neither will make use of them because the deterrence function is too great. There was resistance to that analysis from...
They will use it. Don't be retarded. Nukes are just... The thing with nukes is not enough nukes. It's just the nuke itself. It's too big. It's too powerful. That's it. You don't complete a mutually assured destruction, bro.
The left, because it
Chill
felt
out,
too
you.
clever. There is resistance to the sort of analysis that Sunstein's posing here from both sides because it cuts against the idea that we are introspectively transparent in such a way that our judgments are indicative of the things that we care about.
True.
So the last example that I want to give you from Sunstein is our poll. Sunstein hypothesizes, and are your clickers working? Sunstein hypothesizes that we are more uncomfortable being harmed by things which are meant to protect us than being harmed by things which aren't meant to protect us. And he suggests that there is data showing that if people are given a choice between two cars, the first car is one where there's a 2% chance that things which are meant to protect us than being harmed by things which aren't meant to protect us. We are more uncomfortable being harmed by things which are meant to protect us than being harmed by things which aren't meant to protect us.
You know why? Because the thing is supposed to protect you.
Suggests that there is data showing that if people are given a choice between two cars, the first car is one where there's a 2% chance if you're in an accident that you'll be killed by the steering wheel. And the second is a car where there's a 1% chance if you're in an accident that you'll be killed by a steering wheel. But in addition, there's a 0.1 of 1% chance that the airbag will kill you. And the question is, which car do you choose? The one where there's a 2% chance that you'll be killed by the steering wheel, or the one where there's a 1% chance that you'll be killed by the steering wheel, but a 0.1% chance that you'll be killed by the airbag, which was meant to protect you. Let's see how those numbers come out. I have to say I'm doing this poll because my intuitions didn't line up with Sunstein's, and I'm curious whether yours do. Okay, let's see how the numbers came out. So 15% of you want to buy car A, and 85% of you want to buy car B. So 85% of you are doing what is the statistically rational choice, but a good proportion of you are willing to risk greater harm so as to avoid this feeling of betrayal by that which is meant to protect.
Dude,
so
listen, the thing is, the impact is killing you, not the airbag. You know, the airbag is supposed to protect you. The impact is actually the one that's killing you, not the... Dude, why isn't this looping? Okay, some other music. Loop this.
Just to sum up, is that in moral reasoning, frequently, we substitute heuristic attributes for target ones, and to do so is a mistake.
Dude.
So what do the three responses to the trolley problem that we've considered suggest? Well, what Thompson says is this. She says, reconsidering our intuitions in light of alternative cases, like the alternative bystander case where you imagine yourself to be one of the people on the track. Reconsidering our intuitions in light of alternative cases can lead to shifts in our assessment of those cases. And those shifts in our responses, she thinks, reveal something morally significant. We can learn from the contemplation of those specific cases what it is that morality demands of us.
Okay.
Green and Sunstein, by contrast, contend that our intuitive responses to cases frequently track features that are morally irrelevant, and that as a consequence, those features fail to reveal something morally significant.
Both are retarded.
The question is
both arguments.
Is any of this a problem for Mill and Kant? Let's look back to the very opening pages of Mill's treatise on
something tells me that even though Mill and Kant are like on totally opposite sides of the, you know, philosophical spectrum, these two retards, Sunstein and whoever else the other guy was, they have much better arguments than Sunstein and the others. Green, Joshua Green. They have much better arguments. Even though they are on opposite sides of the philosophical spectrum, they would have better arguments. Because these reasons were just... Bro,
he writes there, and I didn't have you read this passage, so there's no reason you should know that he says it. Though in science the particular truths precede the general theory, the contrary might be expected to be the case with a practical art such as morals or legislation. So in science, we look at particular instances, we discover we drop this object and it falls with acceleration A. We drop this object, we discover it falls with acceleration A. We drop this object, we discover it falls with acceleration A. And from that, we conclude that the law governing fall of bodies is that they fall with acceleration A. So though in science particular truths precede the general theory, the contrary might be expected to be the case with the practical art, such as morals. A test of right and wrong must be a means of ascertaining what is right or wrong, and not a consequence of already having ascertained it. The difficulty of building a theory out of judgments, the difficulty is not avoided by recourse to what is sometimes now called the moral sense, a natural faculty, says Mill, that discerns what's right or wrong in a particular case in hand, as our other senses discern the sight or sound actually present, so as if you can see whether a case is morally wrong. Rather, he says, moral reasoning, moral understanding is a branch of our reason, not of our sensitive faculty. The morality of an individual action is a question of the application of the law to an individual case. As a result, whatever steadfastness or constancy our moral beliefs has attained is due to the tacit influence of this reflectively available standard. So Mill is building theory out of theory, not theory out of cases. Worse service cannot be rendered to morality than that an attempt to be made to derive it from examples. For every example of morality must itself first be judged according to principles of morality in order to see whether it is fit to serve as a model.
Bro, I need
We
to
have
really
here
read
in
some
some ways
Kant.
embodied the dialogue of this course. To what extent is our capacity for rational reflection the best way to get at answers to questions that we care about? To what extent is our capacity for emotional response, for sensation, for instinctive judgment on the basis of presentation of particular cases indicative of answers to the questions we care about?
Okay.
So that closes the discussion of the trolley cases, and what I want to do in the second half of lecture is run through two kinds of puzzles which persist regardless of...
I actually, peace out. Alright. Good stream. Nice hanging out. Thanks for tuning in. If anybody did tune in, I learned a lot. I learned who to respect and not who to disrespect. In this, yeah. But I will definitely write it down. How I disrespect Sunstein and Green. Because the fuck were even those studies? The fuck? I'll find everything that I can. I'll find better people's arguments. I'll find better arguments. I'll find responses. I'll find people who agree with them. I'll find people who disagree with them. And yeah. I don't know why I feel so strongly about this. It's kind of weird, but it is what it is. I am that guy, I guess. Okay, bye YouTube.